A perfect Central Texas brisket is defined by a few distinct markers. You want a dark, peppery crust, a bright pink smoke ring, and meat that is so incredibly velvety it pulls apart under its own weight. But getting to this point is a massive physical challenge. A brisket is a heavily worked pectoral muscle packed with dense connective tissue that is naturally tough and rubbery. Rendering it into something tender requires precise technique. This 3D wireframe shows the raw material required, a whole packer brisket. It is composed of two overlapping muscles. You have the leaner, rectangular flat, and sitting on top is the thicker, fattier point. To break this tissue down, you don't need a complex marinade. You need exactly two elements: 16 mesh coarse black pepper and kosher salt, mixed in a strict 50-50 ratio. The pepper and salt are mandatory. Reliable results depend on the deliberate management of the meat's physical anatomy and the internal thermodynamics of the cook. Step 1 is mechanical preparation. We trim the raw meat into an aerodynamic shape. Rounding off the sharp edges and removing thin, dangling pieces ensures heat and airflow move evenly across the surface inside the smoker without burning the edges. You also have to trim the fat cap down to exactly 1/4 of an inch. If you carve off all the fat, the meat dries out during the long cook. But if you leave too much on, it blocks the smoke from penetrating the meat and leaves you with a thick, unrendered layer instead of a melting texture. Next, we apply the rub. This is why that 16 mesh coarse pepper is critical. The large granules act as a physical anchor, grabbing onto the surface of the meat. Over hours in the smoker, this creates a thick, textured crust known as the bark. Oak smoke between 225 and 250 degrees triggers the Maillard reaction, browning the exterior. Simultaneously, nitric oxide gas penetrates the tissue and binds with myoglobin proteins. These bonds lock into a bright pink subsurface layer, the smoke ring, proving the gas interacted with the meat. These first few hours in the smoker serve one specific purpose: setting that physical bark and establishing a chemical foundation. Because very soon, the meat is going to enter a brutal internal thermal battle. For the first 5 to 6 hours, the internal temperature climbs at a steady, predictable rate. On this graph, the steady climb halts abruptly around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The line flatlines into a prolonged plateau known as the stall. This is evaporative cooling. The meat sweats out moisture, perfectly neutralizing the smoker's heat. It hits thermal equilibrium, refusing to rise. To break this equilibrium, we have to intervene mechanically. We take the brisket off the smoker and wrap it tightly in unwaxed pink butcher paper. We use porous butcher paper instead of aluminum foil for a specific mercurial reason. The paper traps enough heat to push past the stall, but allows excess steam to escape. This prevents the moisture from washing away that hard-won bark. By wrapping the meat, we apply a calculated thermal shift. It forces the internal temperature to keep rising while actively protecting the exterior texture. We leave the wrapped brisket in the smoker until it reaches between 195 and 205 degrees. But the temperature is just a guideline. You know it's ready when a thermometer probe slides into the meat with zero physical resistance. Now begins the most frequently skipped phase of the process, the rest. We place the wrapped brisket inside a dry, insulated cooler for 1 to 2 hours. Inside that cooler, carryover cooking takes effect. The trapped ambient heat causes the internal temperature to rise slightly for a few minutes, before it begins a long, slow stabilization. During this slow cooldown, molecular changes happen inside the tissue. The dissolved collagen and render fats gradually thicken, redistributing evenly throughout the muscle fibers. If you slice the meat right after taking it off the smoker, it's superheated. All of that liquid collagen will instantly bleed out onto your cutting board, leaving you with dry, tough muscle fibers. Patience here is a non-negotiable thermal requirement. Resting is the only way to lock moisture inside and achieve a velvety, juicy texture. Before we slice, we have to solve a final geometry problem. Because the whole packer brisket is made of two overlapping muscles, the internal fibers, or the grain, run in two completely different directions across the flat and the point. We handle this by making one strategic initial cut. We slice straight through the rendered fat seam that connects the two muscles, fully separating the lean flat from the fatty point. Taking the flat first, we cut at precise quarter-inch intervals, exactly 90 degrees across the grain. By slicing perpendicular to the internal fibers, we mechanically shorten them, which guarantees the meat breaks apart easily when you bite into it. Next, we take the fatty point muscle and physically rotate it 90 degrees. This aligns its unique grain structure so that we can slice it perpendicularly as well. What you are left with is a cutting board full of neatly shingled, glistening slices. You have both the lean cuts and the fatty cuts, bordered by a dark crust and a vivid smoke ring, ready to serve. This finished product represents the successful execution of precise structural, chemical, and geometric controls, from the initial trim to the final carve.